that we think are going to be big in 2025. You shouldn't hire any people anymore because people suck. You should hire AI.
Lines of code are just flying across the screen, all these different systems, windows everywhere.
People don't care about the number, they care about the story. They care about the narrative. What are you trying to say?
They found that individual productivity goes up, but overall, that actually sees a slowdown. It's coming from the fact that I don't want to be stuck in meetings all day, right?
So I'm excited in 2025 to see where we can push this. Can we use Pulse to automate an engineering manager? What are some important tech trends from 2024 that we think are going to be big in 2025? That's what we're here to discuss. I'm joined by Carl, our solution architect at Sleuth.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again.
And I'm Don, the CTO co-founder of Sleuth. We're talking about trends from 2024. At the top of our list, I mean, honestly, when we were creating this list, so many things were AI, just because it has had a wrecking ball effect on our industry from one thing to another. And I think one of the aspects of this that has probably the most potential to disrupt is agentic AI, or put another way, AI agents, and put even more crassly, AI replacing people. So when I think of software replacing humans, you can't help but think about this ad campaign, and it's saying that you shouldn't hire any people anymore because people suck. You should hire AI. And it's probably the most overt way of saying that we're going to replace people with computers, but it's probably not entirely wrong. In fact, and you might think this is a new thing, there is this t-shirt from back in the 90s, I think it was, ThinkGeek, if you ever went to that website. I used to get all my Christmas presents there, which basically threatens to replace a person with a tiny shell script. Again, going back to people are replaceable, that is the point of software. So this isn't a new thing, agentic AI, but I feel like this is the first time it's coming at, in a very direct sense, at the software programmers. I guess there's another example. Back in the 80s, they had this concept of if you have a good, a 4GL language, you can have a business person create applications, and now you don't need to hire programmers. And we've gone through many of those kind of cycles, no code, low code, like, you don't need programs anymore, and then always came back to it. And so maybe this is just the latest in a long line of attempts to replace a programmer, but Devin is certainly the one that kind of comes to mind that happened in 2024. Tell us about Devin.
Yeah, Devin, definitely seems like it came out swinging, being able to say, hey, we can replace software engineers on your team. Now, of course, there's marketing behind that, right? And how useful is this? There's a ton of content out there with people, putting this to the test and seeing if it's really something that can truly replace an individual software engineer. I wouldn't say it's there yet, right? I think that when we start looking at some of this AI, I think it makes a lot more sense to think about what is assisting the humans that we have within the organization. But we also have to think about the fact that this is the worst it's ever going to be, from now on out, right? It's just going to improve from here.
Right.
So we'll have to, of course, continue to see what Devin is able to do and what it can help us out with.
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, right, is how far it's going to go, because I have no doubt that it's going to, I personally think it's going to succeed in some way. I mean, we've seen AI agents take over other industries. For example, the SDR, or the person that cold emails people trying to get leads, like more and more that role is being taken over by AI agents. Or support, first level support. You're seeing that happen, taken over by AI agents. Klarna, what's that one?
Yeah, so Klarna, what they have right here is a customer success story here on OpenAI's website that I have open. But what they have done is actually replace a lot of the effort around the level 1 support that they have. So Klarna, if you're not familiar, is a buy now, pay later service. So a lot of requests, of course, that they're getting probably comes from, what do I need to do in order to make my payment go through? I need to update my credit card, or they might, of course, struggle with dealing with all the payments that they have, whatever it might be, right? But this bot now has been able to replace a lot of that level 1 initial support. And actually, the KPIs that they keep track of, I forget the exact ones that they mentioned in the article here, but they do chat about the fact that they introduced this and kept all those key KPIs that they've been evaluating everybody everybody on, that remained flat by introducing this agent.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this is that, we've always seen, as we talked about, computers replacing people, but it tend to be some kind of data entry, some kind of very simple thing. But support, I would argue, can be actually very creative. And we've seen that obviously with music and art. You think there's no way a computer could replace creative, and I would still argue it can't. But there are some aspects that can. And so are we going to see this extend all the way to software development is a question. And then, of course, I have to also ask the question, there's other roles in the software development process. And one of those is software manager. Are we going to see AI replace software managers? What do you think?
Yeah, so I, in general, have a feeling that there's going to be a lot of things that we still need human input on, right? If we think about the fact that we've taken an example of factories, for example, there's a lot of things that we've been able to automate in factories, but you still have humans working inside factories where we haven't been able to get these robots to be able to do the things that we need to do, we need a human for, I should say. And I do think that, whether it's Devin, whether it's a spot from Klarna, or whether it's, thinking about what can we do from an engineering manager perspective, right? Kind of taking care of some of the managers and making sure that we put some automation into place for the work that they're doing. I do still think that at the core, there's going to be things that humans need to be able to provide input on, or tasks that humans just need to do. A very quick example for that, right, is attending meetings, having one-on-ones with the folks that you work with, right, or making sure that a project kind of chugs along. There's going to be a human interaction element that you need there. I don't think AI is going to replace that. So I think, to me, the question more becomes, what toil that I have today, that I'm experiencing today, can I automate away to make me that much more productive? It may ultimately mean, of course, that we have less people doing these kind of tasks, but there's still going to be, I think, a core human element that's going to be tough to completely automate away with AI.
I guess that's the question: is what do you put into toil? Like even the one-on-ones or talking to people and tracking a status of project. One could argue that could be a conversation on Slack that the AI has with the person saying, hey, what's the status of this? Oh, it's delayed because of this. Oh, why is that? And it digs into it, figures out the thing, and is able to compile that for somebody else. Maybe it doesn't completely replace a person, but maybe it does make it so I can manage 20 people instead of 10 people because a lot of the parts of my job are now being automated. There's another aspect of replacing things, which is business intelligence. You're seeing that a lot where business and people in that world, and I'm not of that world, so this is me looking from the outside, are saying AI is going to replace business intelligence. You're not going to have all these big data processing sheets with all these metrics and all these dashboards. You're going to be using AI instead. And I don't think it's so much that AI is going to take all that information or calculate all that information necessarily, but it goes from being a dashboard to something that's actually used, maybe in an agentic sort of way, maybe in another way. But the point is, it goes from this passive displaying of data into something active that's changing a company. And so then that leads me to the second thing, which I think started in 2024 and is going to get only bigger in 2025. And that is the movement of engineering intelligence from dashboards into an active tool. And I think probably the biggest one that comes to my mind is, because again, I'm biased, is Pulse. So that's the product that Sleuth produces. We took a take at the engineering intelligence, which is gathering all this engineering metrics, knowing where you are, how you're aligning. And we have tried to go beyond just dashboard and showing data, but actually doing something with the data, turning that into a collaborative experience, not just a passive one, which I think kind of aligns a little bit with the agentic. In fact, we might even go that way in the future, because it's not just say it's not enough to know that something is this number, but it's like, what are you doing with it? How is that changing something? I think that's the next step.
Yeah, so to that point, right, AI is really good at being able to consume large data sets and help us uncover patterns or summarize the data that we see in there, or even maybe find outliers, right, that we want to be able to pay attention to. So going into the idea of maybe using AI to be able to consume and suck in all that data while having the human interpretation, this is something that we actually do inside of Sleuth Reviews, where we're able to take information coming from various different data sources that we have. So, for example, GitHub or Jira, and be able to consume all that information and be able to, on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever it might be able to then create these summaries that we see here that helps us be able to interpret the information that we have inside of each one of these sections, for example, our engineering-wide objectives. But a human is still providing some additional input here, right? Where it's not completely just letting AI run by itself and create an idea of, hey, this is how engineering is doing. It's more of a AI assisted interpretation of metrics to be able to help us uncover what should we do over the next week, what should we do over the next month, and how we are aligning against the goals that we have for the organization.
Yeah, and I think the point is here is it's not just about the number. Like if you scroll down, so what we're looking at here is we're looking at an actual review that my team did for engineering. And what you're seeing is you're seeing that there's a combination of human assessment, like this is what we're doing, this is what we're struggling with, and actual metrics. Like stop here on this one. This is a great example. So previously what you would do with engineering intelligence, you'd have a big dashboard and it'd have all the coolest metrics of whatever metric system, whether it's DoraSpace or your own and created one, all your perfect metrics. And then anyone visiting would be like, what the hell do I do with this? And it's like, oh, you figure stuff out, but you leave it to the reader to figure that out. And what we have learned is that people don't care about the number, they care about the story, they care about the narrative. What are you trying to say? And in this case, we're saying the CTO template M2 is going well. That's actually what I care about. This is a project that we have at Sleuth? Is this going well? Yes. And so that's what I want to know. But where metrics become really useful is used as supporting evidence for that. So my developer Enos could be like, it's going well. And I'm like, cool. I don't know if I believe you or not. Like, how do I know? What's the details? I want to dig into that. And then instead of her just writing a bunch more text, the metrics build that story and give it some meat. And so in this case, she's showing a metric here of the number of shipped PRs that team has done to show how we've increased our delivery speed. And now that it's done, it's tapering off. So it's telling a story in data of what that story is that the person's trying to tell. And I think this is what's missing so often from our industry is just like BI. We're like, here's a dashboard of all these pretty colors and all these pretty graphs and all this data. But it's like, what does this data mean? What am I supposed to do with this data? What are you trying to tell me with this data? And here's a great actually counterexample. If you go down to the bottom of this report, or we call it a review, we have a section that we just call metrics. And these are all of our DORA metrics, our incident management metrics, things that we care about. What's interesting is how little time we actually spend on this section. When we're going through this review, we're actually really caring about what are feature streams doing, what is operations doing, how is support doing, how is QA doing, what can we learn, what can we improve, what should we be changing. That's what we care about. Metrics themselves, what we do in this section is we kind of scan through and see if there's anything that looks alarming, and if not, we just move on. And I think that's the problem is when people think metrics, they think, oh, I want to have a bunch of data and then that's going to solve everything. And I think what's going to happen is even if you even look at it ever again, which we find many times people set it up and never look at it, even if you look at it, you're like, what's it trying to tell me? People want stories. People want to know what this stuff means. And so metrics first is not the answer, in my opinion. I think really what you're wanting is you're wanting to know how something is going, that assessment, that narrative, that context, and then data should back that up. You should be not just saying things are going great, but actually have real data that shows that they are or they aren't. And we've had even a counterexample of this where someone said, hey, things are going great. I looked at the metrics, they didn't back it up. And so we had a great conversation. So it's that context, it's going beyond. And so I think just like Agentic is trying to go in business intelligence, trying to go beyond just data into actually doing something with it, I think Pulse is trying to, I think we're unique in this space when we're trying to go beyond just the perfect metric or the perfect data into how do you use that data in weekly reviews or weekly, monthly processes, rituals to learn from it and put it into the context of what does it mean, how are things going, and in that sense, you're backing up and you're learning things from it.
And I think that point, learning from it and having that conversation is super important, because I think that we're always looking for the perfect solution, right? DORA, for example, the 4 key metrics, as you just mentioned, that is an industry standard now. We continue to get the DORA report that comes out every year, which continues to kind of talk with more folks, find more insights. And of course, AI happens to be one of the topics that was brought up this year. But the important thing there, right, is that we have something to start with, and then we can see, does that work for us? And does that help us evolve the conversation that we're having? Do we need more metrics? Do we need less metrics? I think oftentimes something that's really tempting with a dashboard, even a BI solution like Tableau, for example, is that, yeah, we can create any type of dashboard that we like to. We can have 100 metrics displayed on one page, but if the expert for that page isn't around, how do we make sure that we can interpret that information and spend the time of understanding what does that mean to us? Mm-hmm. I've spent countless of hours in previous lifetimes putting together PowerPoint slide decks, grabbing screenshots from different BI reports. And what's really interesting is that for some of the screenshots, I felt like I could tell the story. But even me doing this on a regular basis, a monthly, quarterly, and an annual basis, looking into a lot of these different dashboards, for some of those graphs, for some of those data points, I needed to rely on a BI individual to come in and help me interpret, where does this come from? What does this mean? And that is from somebody that could look at that chart on a monthly basis and not, even though I saw, okay, I think this means X, but did it actually mean that? I sometimes was surprised by the answer when I reach out to that person. So we can create these beautifully crafted dashboards that we're forced to take a look at once in a while and still need help just to be able to interpret what the chart says.
Exactly. So you have to go beyond the data. You have to go into context, interpretation, and action. So just like Agentic. So I'm excited in 2025 to see where we can push this. Can we use, Paul, something like this to automate an engineering manager? Probably not. But I think there are more things that we can do to turn data into action, and not just have a lot of pretty graphs. So talking about, you mentioned the DORA report. Let's go into that one. That was another, I think, big thing that came out in 2024 that has a lot of effects and lessons we can learn for 2025. They, in particular, dove into AI a lot in the 2024 DORA report. Talk about what we learned there.
Yeah, so there's a lot of information that we can sift through when it comes to AI. And what I found was interesting coming from the DORA report, which I have up here on my screen, by the way, is that they found that individual productivity goes up, but overall, the impact on the system, so how you actually deliver software, let's say, that actually sees a slowdown. And they go into some reasons for this. But I wanted to focus a little bit on that individual aspect, right? Because we're chatting a lot about, well, how can I enable myself to be more productive? Or how can we enable certain roles to be more productive by leaning on AI? And we can see here that if an individual increases AI adoption by 25%, we can see that things like flow, staying in the flow state, right? That increases, job satisfaction goes up, productivity goes up. Time doing toilsome work, maybe that's, I'm not sure, 0.4% if that's statistically significant enough. But we actually see, that toilsome work and then doing valuable work. I think this last piece is very interesting. Minus 2.6% here, where, and they go into this a little bit down here in the report. They actually think that this might be because the things that we deem valuable, right? What is valuable work is something that has an impact on somebody else, either somebody within an organization or a customer. And maybe that's actually both, right? We're delivering something to folks internally. So AI can actually help us on an individual level to increase the productivity of writing code or writing documentation or whatever it might be. But what's left is still toilsome work, like, for example, sitting in meetings and having those status updates. And that's something that AI hasn't been able to completely automate away. So some of these findings, we can realize that, yeah, the individual tasks that I'm working on, that is quicker, but then I have more time and it's left over, and that time is now spent in meetings, for example, and that just makes me feel like I'm actually doing less valuable work, even though I'm probably at the same level or even increase some of my productivity in terms of the work that I'm delivering.
That's actually a really good point. So I think so much when we talk about AI improving developers, we think about coding speed, we think about like autocomplete stuff like that. But that point of that maybe it's the meetings and things that now are becoming, anyone who's done any kind of performance work in software knows this. You think, oh, this one thing's a bottleneck. You fix it, and sometimes you're good. Most of the time, something else is now the massive bottleneck. And so even though that one thing is 80% faster, the overall speed is 3% faster. Why? Because now we have a new bottleneck. And so maybe even in this new world, let's say productivity gets better and better, you're still going to be hamstrung by meetings and synchronization and status reports and stuff. And I think that's where, going back to the Pulse thing, where I'm really excited about where Sleuth is exploring, is this problem of how can we make those more efficient, where we're not just taking those metrics and that data, but we're putting it in such a way that we're even making meetings more effective. I know in my team, having gone through that weekly meeting template, because it's structured, because it has real data, we have less questions. We know exactly what we're going through. People have done things ahead of time. So our weekly meetings go way faster, probably at least double as fast, probably half as much time as they were before, because it's structured, because there's real data, because we're looking at the things that matter, because we're automating stuff wherever we can, including the summary and the analysis of information. So that's a really interesting point, how it's not just the coding speed that people should be thinking about AI. You should be thinking about all the whole process. And I think that we have a huge opportunity to improve the meeting, the status updates, the synchronization, the alignment, getting people aligned, getting engineering and business aligned, all that kind of stuff has a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just anecdotally from my past experience, if I'm able to take any existing ritual or cadence that I have within my team and make it that much more productive, everybody's happier. If we spent an hour together on a weekly basis and it felt like, well, we actually needed 90 minutes instead, or we kept on doing follow-ups in Slack afterwards in order to be able to make sure that we could get to everything that we needed to get to. If we could take that experience and cut that down to half the time, right, 30 minutes instead of the hour, and we get everything done, that has a huge impact in terms of productivity, but also, honestly, the burnout level and satisfaction in the work that you're doing. If I can sit in 50% less meetings in any given day because we're driving them more efficiently, that would be huge for many reasons.
So big.
But, specifically just coming from the fact that I don't want to be stuck in meetings all day, right?
Sure.
So that's definitely an area that I'm seeing that it can have such a huge impact on me as an individual, but then that can cascade across the entire team, the entire organization, and honestly make everybody happier.
I mean, if you give them farther, if we even remove meetings, and this is something I think that non-developers don't understand, is that if you have a half an hour meeting, the cost of that is actually, I think they even did studies on this, is like 2 hours. Because you don't really want to do anything a half an hour before the meeting because I have a meeting, I'm going to get interrupted. And then you have the meeting, and then it takes a while to get back into it. So the cost to your flow and productivity is so high. So if you can optimize meetings and ideally eliminate some of them, boy, talk about having a huge impact on developers. I mean, remember, when you're first starting out, you think one of my key limitations of development is typing speed. And you quickly learn that no, it has actually very little to do with typing speed because you don't know what to type yet. And if you're typing a bunch of stuff, you're probably typing the wrong stuff. And so you need to stop and think. And so you realize, okay, it's not just about lines of code. It's not just about typing speed. And I think when we think about how to improve engineering, it should be a similar type thought process. It's not about making the developer write code faster or, being able to autocomplete the things for them. You really need to look at the bigger picture and how do we keep developers in that flow? How do we keep them focused on the project? And I think, as you say, being able to automate or streamline a lot of the interactions, a lot of the reporting, a lot of the alignment that needs to happen could have probably a bigger impact than any of it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I started thinking about all those, movie scenes, right, where, somebody's hacking into the mainframe and they're just typing away, right, and just lines of code are just flying across the screen, all these different systems, Windows everywhere. and they think that, hey, that's the experience of somebody hacking, right? Meanwhile, it's probably more something like this: somebody staring at the screen trying to figure out, oh, does this work? Nope. Okay, 30, 40, 50 minutes of research and trying out some different things. Like, oh, does this work? And oh yeah, it did, right? And you kind of slowly but surely untap things, and then the more senior you get, the quicker you are at kind of problem solving, right? But it really
Right.
comes down to, you're not just sitting there writing code, every single second of the day. It is more about tackling those problems, and I think that's where a lot of developers get joy out of their daily work, and being able to be more productive around that and have less distractions. I think that's key.
Yeah. So I think, when you look back at 2024, there's a lot of things that happened, but I think these things, three things that we talked about: AI agents, we talked about moving beyond just metrics and dashboards into action through Sleuth Pulses, is how we're exploring that, and talked about Dora Report and how we saw just improving the developer productivity actually has a negative impact in other things, and you really need to think more holistic. I think I have a lot of optimism for 2025. It feels like these things are just really starting, like the lessons from the Dora Report, the things that we're doing in Sleuth, you and I, in exploring this space and these problems, these solutions, the way that the AI agents are growing and expanding. I think there's a lot of interesting things ahead, and I'm really excited to be part of it.
Yeah, same here. I'm not sitting here thinking that I have a crystal ball, right? I'm on the ride like everybody else, but it's really interesting to see how rapidly everything is evolving, and it's just going to continue to ramp up in 2025. So it's going to be an exciting time for sure.
Yeah, and that's what's so exciting about being in software, is because we could look at all these trends that are happening in the industry. We could implement some of the lessons and improvements into our product. So I'm really excited to see where we can take this. And we'll keep chatting about it next year, and we'll see how much of our big dreams come to reality.
Oh yeah, looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Don.
See you next time.